The claim today that we'll be going against is that texting an average of 3,000 texts per month has negative effects on teenagers. And the advocate's secondary claims are: first, teenagers texting negatively affects how students perform in school. Teenagers actively texting are more likely to lead to health problems, and that teenagers text while driving. His first secondary claim that teenagers texting negatively affects how students perform in school. First, for the last 2 points of evidence over the students about that they did not pay attention in class and the students are texts during class are more distracted while doing homework or studying is not reliable. And the reason for this is because there's no statistical evidence to prove that. So it just makes it harder for the listeners to believe his point. The secondary claim that teenagers actively texting are more likely to lead to health problems. The first supporting evidence talking about how texting can lead to bad behavior, giving stats on such drinking and using drugs is not reliable because it simply does not explain a cause-effect relationship behavior. As MFT Progress Note states, it found correlation associated between certain behaviors that tend to rise and fall together. It did not say what causes what. As the Progressive Note states, first, one texting causes drinking, drinking causes texting, and third, some other thing as a parental supervision causes both drinking and texting. As MFT Progressive Notes also states, a correlation study like this one does not tell us which of those three possibilities most likely. The third strikes me as part of the most plausible. Therefore, giving this statistical evidence of the likelihood of something happening, like 40% more likely to have tried cigarettes in youth, it's a likelihood. It's giving a correlation between texting and the likelihood of that happening, not giving the cause and effect. As if they're texting, it causes them to try cigarettes or do drugs. As for the second evidence and secondary claim, students are sleep deprived. Studies done by KidsHealth.org states these studies show that during the teens years, the body's circadian rhythm, sort of an internal biological clock, is temporarily reset, telling a person to fall asleep later and wake up later. This change in circulation rhythm seems to be due to the fact that brain hormone melatonin is produced later at night for teens, as it is for kids. For teens, that it is for kids and adults. This can make it harder for a teen to fall asleep earlier. Therefore, proves that evidence he gave is not so reliable because, as here it says, the cause for kids falling asleep later or sleep deprived could be just their hormones in their body increasing. His third evidence point there, as for third, is not reliable since no evidence provided to prove it causes stress injuries. So since he doesn't provide any evidence to show that texting gives stress injury, then it's hard to believe. His third claim that teenagers text while driving. The second evidence point provided to support the claim that it increases their crash risk is irrelevant because the evidence overall talking about driver inattention, it does not specifically say due to texting while driving. His evidence says that the people in the car accident just inattention. It doesn't specifically say that they're texting while they crash or anything, and it just has a statistic about teens. Secondly, the reasoning for the third supporting point does not make sense since the claim that the teenagers text while driving is a fact. So yeah, teenagers text while driving is a fact. It's not a claim. The reasoning will make more sense if the claim said increase the crash risk. Therefore, the reasoning combined with the evidence is not reliable because it does not provide a clear understanding. Overall, the claim given by the advocate is hard to believe because it does not provide reliable evidence and is only giving correlations between texting and the negative effects of teenagers.
Okay, it starts off pretty well with a label of the main and secondary claims, and I thought you had a clear signpost as you got to that first point. Your challenge to reliability is basically an argument that there's a lack of statistical evidence. What you don't really do is talk about the evidence that the advocate did present and why that's not adequate, and then suggest that statistical information would suggest that it's more reliable. And I think that's a good challenge here, that it's hard to make an inference based on something without some sense of proportion or how widespread something is. But then the very next claim, you're arguing we can't really trust statistics because we've got all these causality things that are being attributed to mere correlations. So I think that that's a good press also. That's a good argument, but coming right after the one that you had right in front of it, it almost makes it sound like you're trying to put them in a no-win scenario. If you present a statistic, it doesn't mean anything, and you didn't present a statistic. And it seems like you're just kind of grasping at any issue that comes up here instead of making clear what your objection is on this particular point. On the sleep deprivation issue, I think that there's an argument here that's basically a counter-causality argument, and that is that the sleep deprivation that teenagers go through has less to do with their texting and their activities, and has everything to do with the hormone things, and I think that's a good challenge to make there. You have an explanation about how it's related to the hormones. I didn't hear a very clear argument about what the advocate's evidence on that point was, and so I'm not sure that they are in fact disconnected from one another. Maybe the hormones are driven by the texting that's going on. That could be an explanation, and I don't remember the advocate's evidence on that point, and since you didn't really talk about it in depth there, I don't know that it got you that much. The challenge on stress and the lack of evidence, that's a good point to point out. If the advocate didn't have any evidence on that point, I think that that's definitely something that you want to explain. And then the whole thing about inattention in texting and what's going on in the car and so on, it just got confusing. I think that there's an argument here, but I couldn't really tell what it was. It felt quite a bit like you were going in circles on this particular point. I know that inattention does not automatically equal texting, but the inference that texting has a limited impact or that it's related to, for instance, the frequency with which people text, I think that's maybe a better press to be making. But I really had a hard time figuring out what all of the inferences were on your third point. It just felt like you were making claims and not really explaining them very clearly. So that's the one point that I thought had the biggest problem with it. And the other points, you had good arguments on them. Sometimes they could be a little bit stronger, but the third point I thought was surprisingly confusing. All right, thank you.